If you're gonna buy one of the new M3 Max MacBook Pros, is it better to buy a 14-inch or a 16-inch? That's the question that we're going to address today. There's $300 that separate these identically configured MacBook Pros that both have the 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU, 48 gigabytes of unified memory, and 1 terabyte SSD. So that's $4,000 for the 16-inch or $3,700 for the 14-inch. A steep price, especially for machines that only come with 1 terabyte of storage. That honestly should be illegal. But the main question that we're going to look at here is, what's the difference? Obviously, for your $300, you get a larger display and a bigger battery, but do you get more performance, better thermals, and how much better exactly is the battery life? Those are all things that we're going to find out today. I have put identical disk images on both of these machines. I've charged them both to 100% battery, and we're going to find out what the differences are right after a word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by BenQ and their new BenQ Design View 4K Designer Monitor. This 27-inch 4K monitor boasts seamless Mac compatibility with easy USB-C connection and AQ color accuracy, boasting greater than 95% color gamut with P3 support and Delta E values less than 3 right out of the box. In fact, BenQ even provides a personal color accuracy report in the box with your display. Mine showed Delta E of just 1.28. All that means when you're using the Design View 4K with your MacBook, you can expect 1-to-1 image quality and color accuracy. One of the Design View's main features is its super simple and easy to set up ergonomic arm. This allows for effortless swivel and height adjustment, as well as pivot and tilt. And it does all that with easy cable management to keep your desk free of clutter. Plus, for added simplicity, the Hockey Puck V2 allows for easy display controls and switching between multiple devices through the built-in KVM switch. And on top of all these great features, it comes in at just $629. And if you check out the link in the description below, you can use my code to save even more money. This thing really is impressive in its feature set and a great value for money. So big thanks to BenQ for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the video. All right, so let's not mess around. Let's get straight into the benchmarks, and we're gonna figure out what the differences are. Now, straight away, a big tool that's gonna help with this is TG Pro, which just got updated for the M3 series, and that's gonna allow us to have a really nice look at the thermals inside these machines. Now, sitting here at idle, both of the fans are off, and our temperatures are right around 36 to 40 degrees Celsius on both machines. No differences so far. But let's see what happens when we throw a Blender render at the situation. Both of these machines should perform about the same. But we're now a minute into the test, and I am starting to hear the fans on the 14-inch only. So if we pull up TG Pro here, you'll notice the temperatures are peaking at 103 degrees on both machines. However, all of our cores on the 14-inch are at that number, except for one now. And our fans, you can see, are almost halfway up to full speed. We're at 2,500 RPM compared to 1,400. So this continues a trend that we saw back with the M1 Max, which is fans kicking in sooner and louder on the 14-inch, but you'll notice the temperatures are pretty similar. The key difference here is Apple doesn't need to ramp the fans up to maintain that 100 degrees Celsius target, and in fact, we're now dropping quite a bit, even though the fans have stayed at 1,500 RPM. So interestingly, now that the render has finished, the 16-inch actually did do a little bit better. We're at 3 minutes 28 seconds compared to 3:35 on the 14-inch. That's not a huge difference, but that is something. So I think we should fire up Cinebench and just absolutely throw everything at these CPUs. All right, so let's start a Cinebench run here. Again, these should be very similar. What we're really interested in is thermal performance, and you can see the 14-inch is definitely heating up faster, and it looks like we've just started to kick in the fans on both machines, but we're definitely ramping up faster on the 14-inch. Sure enough, almost immediately, I'm starting to hear the 14. It's not super loud, and I can actually just hear the 15-inch as well. All right, the 16-inch is really stepping up here. Now, the RPMs are different because the 14-inch fans actually spin faster. You can see our max is 7,450 RPM compared to 5,700 on the 16-inch, but they are both audible. But the fans are actually doing a better job now. Just like we saw in Blender, our temperatures are coming down once the fans have kicked in, whereas on the 14-inch, they're still staying pretty high. Okay, we're nearly done here. It looks like the 14-inch is finishing first, 15, 20 points. That's right in line with what I've been seeing. But the 16-inch seems to be doing a little bit better. And there we go, 1691. Wow, that is fast. So that's about 11% faster than the 14-inch. That's definitely not nothing. And if you look here in the ranking list, the M3 Max 16-inch is actually outperforming the M1 Ultra, and it's more than twice as fast as the M1 Max. In just 2 years, we've doubled CPU performance. That's crazy. All right, so now that we've seen how the fan curves and the CPU temperatures work on both of these machines, I want to do a thermal load test. And basically the way we're going to do this is very simple. I've started Cinebench. You can see our temperatures are rising, our fans are kicking in, but given that we have the same CPU with the same load, if I go ahead and click these buttons here to max the fans out in both machines, so now we're just absolutely throwing everything at it, what are the differences in the CPU temps? So we can already see our temperatures are coming back down into the yellow and the green on the 16-inch. They are starting to back down a little bit on the 14 as well. All right, so it's been a couple minutes. The machines have leveled out and we're still sitting at about 100 degrees Celsius on the 14 and 87, 88 on the 16. So it's about a 12-degree difference, and that gives you a good idea of how much more thermal headroom the 16-inch MacBook Pro has. The 14 is honestly pushing the limits here. I mean, we've got the fans maxed out and we're still at 100. All right, so next up, let's compile some code. I used this Xcode benchmark last week on the M3 Max 14-inch, and now we're gonna run them side by side to see if there's any performance difference. So if we look at TG Pro here, you can see some of our cores are getting pretty hot and our fans are starting to kick in, but we're not maxing out every single core. We don't have everything in the red like we used to. So perhaps we're not pushing the thermal envelope and the results are gonna be more similar. And the results are in. Turns out I was right. The 16-inch completed the task 1 second faster than the 14-inch. That's definitely not worth considering as a difference in performance between these machines. So let's shift our focus now to the GPU, and specifically we'll go back into Blender. I want to test out Metal RT. And this is going to be an interesting test because both of these machines are so fast that I can't imagine thermals are going to make a difference. And sure enough, we're at 18.73 seconds compared to 18.88 seconds. Wouldn't exactly call that a groundbreaking difference, but that makes sense because again, we're using this as a 20-second test. It's not gonna push the GPUs enough to where the thermals are gonna become an issue. All right, so let's do another quick GPU test to see if it's the same here. We've got 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme running, and wouldn't you know it, 188.5, 188.7. They're basically identical. But what about a more real-world test that is going to use the GPU for an extended period of time? Let's run the Tomb Raider benchmark and see if there's a noticeable difference between these two machines. Now this is weird. Why are we seeing so much higher FPS on the 16-inch? It's like 50 FPS more. Whoa, hello, okay. So the test finished here and I noticed weird results. Right, well, I ran the test again. All the settings are the same. The 14-inch, for whatever reason today, is not performing. Average FPS of 97, that's not what I've gotten on this machine before. But we are getting 134 pretty much every time on the 16-inch. And that is a little bit better than what we were scoring on the 14. The highest that I've gotten on the 14-inch is 129. The highest that we got on the 16 was 141. So it looks like you could see a gain of maybe 5 to 10 FPS on average with the 16-inch. That's honestly, that's not nothing. So the results this far have been pretty interesting. We're definitely seeing some gains in long-term tasks on the 16-inch. We're definitely seeing better thermal performance on the 16-inch, but in a lot of cases, the 14 is really not that far behind. I mean, the biggest gap that we saw was 11% in Cinebench, and considering that this is $300 cheaper, that really doesn't stand out to me as a bad deal. Now let's check in on our battery life test, because this entire time we've been testing that. We are at 46% on the 14-inch and 48% on the 16. Wow. That is surprising. I mean, I was looking up there and I could tell that they were close, but a 2% difference is crazy. All right, so lastly today, let's look at Final Cut Pro. We're gonna do our usual render and export test. This 20-minute 4K clip is what I've been using most of the time, so we're just gonna go ahead and get that started. And I don't expect to see any real differences here because in the render test, I wasn't even able to distinguish really any difference between an M3 Max, an M2 Max, and an M2 Ultra. I mean, these are very different chips, but they all do about the same in the render. I think those hardware decoders and encoders are doing most of the work here, so we'll see what happens. And sure enough, almost 5 minutes later, 99, 99, let's see. Okay, that dude, they literally finished at the exact same moment. Like, you would have to go down frame by frame to see if there was any difference. In fact, can we get a frame by frame playback? Let's see. Oh. Yeah, okay, so it's basically the same. All right, so now let's do a quick export, and we're going to export this to H.264 because we did 2 tests last week, and the first one revealed no differences between the M2 Max and the M3 Max. So I think we're running into a bit of a limitation with the encoders, but in H.264, there were massive gains for the M3 Max. So let's see if that continues here as well. All right, 3 minutes in, we're at 20% on both machines. I suspect we're not gonna find a huge difference here. Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention there. That was the same. That was maybe a quarter of a second between these two machines. And yeah, 14.5 minutes, that's about the same as before. I'm not surprised here. Again, folks, when we're doing Final Cut, anything with video is going to be using those decoders a lot. We're not gonna be maxing out the CPU. In fact, it seems like we didn't even break a sweat here. The fans didn't kick in, the CPU temps didn't get very high. So let's go ahead and see what our battery is like after all of the testing. Nearly 2 hours I've been recording here. We're at 37% on the 14, 41 on the 16. So this is actually a much narrower difference. I remember first testing the 14 v 16 with the same spec back in 2021, and there was a much bigger difference in battery life. So the good news here is you're not giving up that much battery life if you go for the 14-inch. But as with before, there are some thermal and even some performance differences between these different form factors. In Tomb Raider, we saw a roughly 5% average frame difference going to the 16-inch if we exclude that weird outlier of the 14 today. And in Cinebench, we saw over 10% performance gain for the 16-inch. And that is not nothing. 11% CPU gain is roughly an M1 to an M2. So it's not to be scoffed at, but I don't think it means the 14-inch MacBook Pro is bad. Because again, we didn't really see that 11 or 12% difference in a lot of the other things that we tested. In 3D Mark, in the Xcode compile test, and in Final Cut Pro, there was no difference between these machines, or at least no appreciable difference between these machines. So to my mind, the bigger drawback, if you will, to the 14-inch is the thermal one. I don't think it's deniable that the 14-inch is going to get hotter, faster, and it's going to be louder. Now, it's not loud. You definitely do hear the fans a decent amount on this machine, a lot more than on lesser Apple Silicon machines. So do keep that in mind. But I don't think it's to the point where, yeah, it's not like a 2018 MacBook Pro where the thing's at like 150 degrees Celsius, the fans are screaming, the bottom plastic rubber feet are melting off the machine. It's not Intel, okay? But it is a difference that you should keep in mind. And if that's important to you, the 16-inch MacBook Pro does really solve all those problems. The fans are very quiet. The battery life is very good. The performance is, well, it's the best performing MacBook ever. Not that that's a surprise, because of course it is. So if you are looking to buy a 16-inch MacBook Pro, you can rest assured that you're not just going to get a larger screen and a little bit better battery life. You could also experience slightly higher performance depending on the task, and you could also experience cooler temperatures and lesser fan noise. If that's important to you, then the 16-inch MacBook Pro has got you covered. But I want to stress, the 14-inch MacBook Pro is by no means, crippled by its form factor. It is perfectly capable of being an extremely powerful machine. And honestly, the drawbacks, that lesser battery life, louder fans, higher temperatures, slightly less performance in some cases, those really pale by comparison to what is so great about the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and that's its form factor. It's tiny, it's portable, and it's super powerful. And don't get me wrong, I am a big display guy. Give me a big MacBook Air, get me a Pro Max iPhone. But when it comes to the 16-inch MacBook Pro, even I have a hard time saying, okay, yeah, I'm gonna take this on an airplane and put it in an economy tray table where the front of the laptop is literally pressing into me and the screen is stuck in the seat behind me. This thing is pushing the limits of what I would consider to be portable now. So, by all means, save your $300, get yourself a 14-inch MacBook Pro. This thing is a beast. I mean, they both are, but you know what I mean. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about the results of this test. Let me know in the comments below, and definitely be sure to like and subscribe. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.